Okay, so we gotta talk about oil because the last 2 days of the month of June and therefore the last 2 days of the second quarter 2025 will be extremely important for the oil price. It's the number one commodity I'm watching for the next 2 days. I will tell you why in this video and an upcoming video. It's that many important factors that we need to talk about when it comes to oil, and I will also show you my strategy for oil. And in this video, I'm gonna give you one of the oil stocks that I want to buy and another one in the next video. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Hot Trades of the Day, your show for swing trading ideas for the coming days, weeks, and month.
Okay, so I got a question from Israel, and it says, hey Daniel, what do you think on the oil price right now? Do you think they will keep dropping? Thank you so much for the quality content. You're very welcome. Your fans from Israel. Well, first off, I hope you and your family and your friends are safe. Now let's get to the oil price. Now, we basically have 4 different factors that we need to talk about, and that's too much for one video. So I'm gonna break it down in 2 videos. We have the fundamentals, which means supply and demand. We have valuations. We have geopolitics, which are extremely important for the oil market. And we have the market technicals, from sentiment to the sector allocation, the sector weights in the indices and whatnot. So today we're gonna start with the fundamentals and we're gonna start with the valuation. But first, a look at the chart of oil. Now, this is the chart for 2025, and you can see, wow, the next 2 days gonna be absolutely crucial for oil, because as you can see, it's all or nothing for this turnaround in oil. We broke the long-term downtrend from 2022. As you can see, we ran up to this resistance zone where we also had a downtrend from 2024. And then we had the massive sell-off at the beginning of the week. And now, where do we stand now? As you can see, we fell back into the old downtrend from 2022. We are right at this former resistance zone, now support, the yellow zone. We are right at the uptrend of the recent up move, and we're right at the 50, this purple line. Okay, all this. Now, first off, this is triple support. That's really strong, right? And we see it today, right? As you can see, this is really important, right? Monster sell-off, what a nasty candle, right? Basically wiping out a week's gain in one day. Second red candle, already a little shorter on Wednesday. Today we got a green candle. Yes, we got sold off again, but at least it's green. Now, this is why this is important. In the month of June, there are only 2 trading days left, today and Monday. But it's not only the end of the month of June, it's also the end of the quarter. And that is really important because we have 2 big data points, right? New weekly candle, that's gonna look terrible, obviously, with a big sell-off we got on Monday, we know this. Let's take a look at it right now. Yeah, that's yikes. And there's basically not much that the last 2 days gonna save there. But then when we look at the monthly, we see, oh, there's a lot of important stuff happening, right? We really could use another green candle. We already made a higher high and a higher low on the monthly, good. But we really could use a strong finish that pushes us over the downtrend on the monthly. As you can see, we haven't closed over on the monthly, right, above this downtrend since it started. That's why this is so important, why the monthly candle is so important. That's why the next 2 days are so important. That's why oil is the most important commodity to watch for us in the next 2 days. People will talk about gold and about silver. Copper looks really good, right? But oil is the one that's going to give us the most interesting signals. So let's talk about fundamentals and valuation. Now, the oil bulls will say oil is so cheap, and it's true. Oil is cheap. It's historically cheap by any metrics you choose. Let me just give you one. The gold oil ratio. This ratio is basically calculated by how many barrels of oil do you need to buy 1 ounce of gold. So the higher it is, the more expensive gold is. the cheaper oil is. Right now, with the gold oil ratio, we have the second highest level in 65 years. That's insane. These are the type of extremes that people like Warren Buffett usually buy in and make a killing. Valuations are cheap, but why are they cheap? Because the fundamentals have changed, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Fundamentals in the commodity sector always supply and demand. And it used to be that the US was very dependent on oil from the Middle East, Latin America, obviously the France and Canada, but then also, even more so, was extremely concerned to make sure that their partners in Europe and their partners around the world got secured oil supply from the Middle East. That's why the oil in the Middle East got so important, right? It was the US, yes, but most of all, it was basically the US taking care of its partners. Europe likes to forget that, right? The US is doing a lot for Europe. It has done a lot for Europe in history. Now, the US achieved oil independence. So that means the US is now the second largest exporter of oil, right? That means the old times of oil over $100 a barrel, we will only get that if we have a monster geopolitical shock. And let me prove this to you. So if we go back in the oil price, and let me get to the weekly on this, because we are going back quite a bit. And you see that the only time we've been over 100 was the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, the first land war in Europe since the Second World War. A monster historic event. And then as you can see, we got to go all the way back to 2014, right? 10 years. In 10 years, only one time we've been over $100. That was when the oil price just exploded after the invasion of Ukraine. So that clearly shows us that we have a change of dynamics. Now, the interesting part is that the oil companies actually profited from the ESG movement. So one of the reasons why energy, and I'm only touching briefly on this because we're going to talk about this more in the next video, why the energy stocks and the oil stocks are so out of favor in the stock market is they got hit with a historic triple combination of the oil bear market, the ESG movement that most people have forgotten already, right? But remember, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, this was the hot topic. All right, I remember being on Wall Street, and every presentation at the conferences I would attend would start with ESG related slides. Companies that had nothing to do with mining or anything like that, still ESG was the topic. When I go to conferences in New York right now, maybe one slide at the end of the presentation. That is over. But it was the hot topic. Remember Harvard and like a bunch of universities saying that they're going to sell all their oil stocks and never going to invest in oil stocks again and oil again. All these things, it was hard on the oil companies, right? So with the oil bear market, with ESG movement, right? And then on top, we had the geopolitical problems where oil has been used as a geopolitical weapon to hit the Russian economy. We'll talk about that in the next video. Now, those are three big time whammies. We know the ESG is finished, and that's important to understand, right? Because now that means if we get a turnaround in oil, we got 2 out of the 3 not working against the oil companies anymore. So how do I play oil? Well, the first thing is I will not invest in oil, in physical oil anymore. Why? Because I don't believe we're going to go to $100 a barrel regularly, maybe in a short squeeze, right? But regularly without a geopolitical crisis, major geopolitical crisis. Why? Because there's no oil demand from the US anymore. And the US is the biggest economy in the world. And China is going to gobble up all the Russian oil. So that means the only way fundamentally how oil can go to 100 is if Europe is doing well economically. Well, enjoy betting on that. But what oil can do, absolutely can do, is it can go back up to around 80 to a 90. Basically, this range right here. Very realistic. As you can see, we've reached a couple of times, right? However, if we are at around 65 right now, what does it mean if we go to 85? That's 20 bucks. That's about 30% I can make in oil itself. And I have all the risk. That's not worth it for me. So I like oil stocks. Why? Because they're extremely cheap right now. And if you pick the right ones, you get crazy high dividend yields because nobody is invested in oil stocks right now. So I buy these oil stocks not to make a profit on the stock price, but to get an incredible dividend yield. These are my dividend plays. And then if oil goes to 85 and these oil stocks can easily double or triple, they're so low right now, I get that as a free bonus on top of it. But that's not what my initial investment is. And one of the stocks that I like, for example, is the Brazilian Petrobras, right? You get the most spectacular dividend yields in the emerging markets oil companies. And I like Petrobras, the biggest oil company of Brazil, fighting with corruption problems for most of their lives, big problem, but a big oil company, one of the biggest oil companies in the world. This will not go under. Right now, depending on where you buy it, has about a 20% dividend yield, 20% dividend yield. Now, maybe they cut it, but they're not going to cut it too much. Why? Because the government collects a big fat dividend check from Petrobras. A lot of powerful politicians are in Petrobras, Brazilian politicians. They want their dividends. So this is fairly safe. Now, they cut the dividend in the past, right? I'm not saying it's 100% secure, but even if they would cut it by 50%, I still get a 10% dividend yield. That's amazing. None of the big American players can give me that kind of dividend yield. Now, Petrobras, not as secure, much riskier, absolutely, than some of the big American companies, but then also much cheaper on the valuations. So this is one of the companies that I want to buy into, again, as a dividend story first, and then the stock price appreciation will be a bonus on top. So this is it for the first part of oil. If you like the content, if this gives value to you, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button, takes you 1 second, so you don't miss a video, you don't miss these type of information in the future. Remember to pay close attention to what's happening on oil in the next 2 days. This will be really important. That's it for today. Have a great weekend. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.